I don't think I knew how to level out my tripods back then. Hey, it's Valentina V, and welcome back to set. We usually have a lot of things that we bring, but I get it, like you might be starting out, you might not have anything but a camera, and that's how I started out over a decade ago. I'm gonna show you something that I made that we're gonna remake today, using everything that I've learned since then. Let's try to make it better this time. I am recreating an old short film over a decade ago. But first, I have to react to it. Okay. Gotta get in a mental place to be able to react to something this horrendous. The concept behind this is that the kids are cosplaying as their parents, and they're putting on a show to demonstrate to their parents an intervention, like how they act. Whew. All right, let's do it. Okay. I hate this shot. Now when I shoot fridges, I tape down the lights in the fridge and I put my own lights inside the fridge, but obviously didn't have that knowledge back then. Look at this foreground action and background action. Okay, I knew something. I knew something.
Your mother burns your omelets.
Okay.
She showers them.
I was really into cutting people off. This is called giving people a haircut. I was really into giving people haircuts. Also because like I didn't have any lighting, right? So, and I didn't have any production design really. So this kitchen was really ugly. So I was like, let's not show it.
She showers them slightly.
I don't mind this shot. It's a front side key though.
It is always more than happy to wife. You can trust me with your delicates.
Oh no. Wait a second. This shot. This reflection here. This expanse of white, this scribbling, I guess they had a kid, these random artifacts, but nowhere else.
Delicates. Another warned me to say would come. You think you're all that, then go get a job.
Wait, this looks actually really good. I remember I used this exact frame as the thumbnail for this video. Can we just stop here? Can we just stop at this frame? No, we gotta keep watching, huh? Look at this. Beautiful. Wait, where was the cut? Seamless. There might not even have been a cut actually. No, there was no cut. Yeah, I went from her medium and then I just whipped over to them. And then you can see that the letterbox bars come in. And I also like that the light isn't too frontal. That's the sunlight and that's what I was using. It's the backside key. I mean, it's very blown out. It's also out of focus. This is such a flat lighting on her face. Nothing in the background. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm forcing you to watch this. The windows here are also super blown out. I didn't really know anything about exposure. I just wanted to have enough light on his face. I can't believe adults, full-fledged adults, allowed me to make this video of them. I mean, thank you. I appreciate these actors for being in this and helping me out. That's the only way you improve is if you keep trying. So let's actually go back to set and see what I can improve. Yeah, I'm sorry you had to watch that. It was shot with a T3i, which is the only thing I could afford at the time. This time we're shooting with this guy. It's not as fancy as our other cameras because it's not about the camera. It's about the lighting. It's about the technique. It's about the production design. It's about everything else. So let's get into that a little bit. Points. Hot tip, when you move stuff on a set, it doesn't even matter if you're moving camera or lights or production design or anything, you just say points. And that way everyone knows what direction you're coming from and that you are carrying something to get out of the way. Do you want to sit in for this? Oh, yeah. Do you want to be our little boy? Here's one thing that I did in the old, you saw it. What'd you think about it?
It was awesome.
Yeah, it lies. Here's what I did in the old short. I just shot it in order, but it doesn't make sense today because you want to get the most intense setups done first. By the time the actors come, the shot is more or less ready so that they don't have to sit here for like 4 hours. Okay, you count to 10. Ready?
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Kid actors are a little bit different because you have to be like playful and nice to them and tell them stories and not just like get down to brass tacks with adults. So if everything's set up, my brain can focus on talking to the kids and being like, oh my gosh, hi, how are you? What grade are you in? Like all that jazz.
It's all your money.
Nice. The good thing last time was that I just used natural light. This time, it's the same thing. So all of the windows are gonna be what motivates our lighting. This is a 600D Pro on a Mambo combo stand, and it is that harsh backlight motivator. Originally, we were gonna bounce that fake sunlight over on this side of his face, but we realized it wasn't enough light.
The building's kind of covering some of that light, and so we can't really bounce it anymore. So we're just gonna try to augment the light coming from there and bouncing it onto the B-board so we can give it more wrap on that side.
And then we're gonna put floppies on this side so that this side of his face can be a little bit darker on this side. So imagine like a whole wall here. That is a technique cinematographers do to make things more dynamic. One of the ways that you can really upgrade your kit if you can't afford a cinema camera is to really think about diffusion and filtration. So here we have a black pro mist filter. The blacks are gonna be a little bit lighter because we're taking away a little bit of that digital look.
C.
Camera speed.
2 alpha, take 1, marker.
Right now, I'm using my guides up. He is positioned 1/3 on the right, just like a very classic framing for talking shots like this. Because her shoulder and her hair is on the left side, it goes completely dark because there's no light on her. So that's why I have been here just Hollywooding a little MC light just on her hair a little bit. And 3, 2, 1, action. Cool, awesome cut. That was awesome, guys. So the shot that I'm trying to achieve right now is the other half of the conversation. Obviously, we saw the girl's back, but now we need to see her deliver her lines so that we can go back and forth. Right now, what we're doing is we're cheating, which means we are moving the table around, we're moving the actors around in order to get the best frame. I feel like when I was a beginner, all I could shoot was what I was given. Didn't realize that, hey, the viewer doesn't really know the layout of this house. The viewer isn't gonna catch on. Is that a cat meowing? Oh my God. Camera speeds.
Scene 2, cattails, take 3, mark.
Now we're flipping the world 180 degrees the other way. So imagine if the table is here and then the parents are here. We're also adding a hair light for our couple because we have a lot of interesting stuff in the background, but they're gonna sort of blend into it if they don't have like a physical separation. So that is a 300X. Or if you just have a daylight light, just gel it with some color temperature orange CTO gel. As you can see clearly, the couch is so much farther from the wall. And in the old one, as you can see, it's just very flat. Whereas here, I'm trying to take full advantage of this place. As soon as we walked in on the location scout, I was like, this is the shot. This is the money shot right here. 3, 2, 1, action.
A Pop-Tart again?
I didn't have enough time to get groceries yesterday.
Oh, but you got your hair done.
Duh, that's why I didn't have enough time to get groceries. Keep up.
Well, how much did that cost?
What it cost?
How much? 100? 200?
Okay, why was being like this?
It's my money.
It's our money.
What's that?
It's our money!
Stop it! That's enough.
Dad, I told you not to say anything until we're done.
Yeah, we had this whole thing planned.
A thing?
Okay, so we saw this thing on TikTok and somebody's doing an intervention for their brother.
He was taking coke.
And you're getting divorced.
We're not getting divorced.
Look, me and your mother disagree on a lot of things, but we work through them, and we always have, okay?
Now, who's cleaning this up? Should we tell them?
And it's so good, that's a wrap! Yeah! That was interesting because it was the first time that we actually did a full short.
There was probably a lot of soul searching happening throughout the episode.
It was weird because I remember the last time I did it so much faster. There was no slate, there was no lighting, there was nothing. You just aim and shoot.
We can actually make higher level decisions like this thing is covering up the frame just a little bit, or this is distracting. Let's get rid of it.
Let's take a look at some side-by-sides. So this is the before and this is the after of the boy at the table.
Whoa. But it really goes to show how much more you know and how much that translates on screen.
I believe we have a question from the net.
Put in your questions down in the comments. We pretty much covered almost every topic when it comes to actually lighting a scene and shooting it. Well, this question comes from your green screen episode. What would be the alternative solution to eliminate reflective surfaces without sacrificing light temperature? Would filters be the case?
You can eliminate reflections with a polarizer filter.
Polarizer filters is the way to go. Really have it on handy because reflections, they're everywhere. Well, great episode. Can't wait to see you next time.
Bye. I'm gonna check the script. No papers in my house. Mostly because I don't own a printer.
I haven't done this before, I've seen it, right? Yeah. So I kind of just wanted to wrap my head around what goes into something like this.
What do you think today is going to be that?
LED video wall.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Aputure channel. I'm Brandon from the Aputure team, and welcome to the live stream presentation for the Lightstorm 600C Pro. First off, I'd like to apologize to everyone for having to push this live stream back by a week. We really wanted to get it out at the same time as we started shipping those pre-orders last Thursday, but we faced those COVID production delays like we mentioned on social media. But maybe that was a blessing in disguise, because by this point in time, a lot of you have actually had a chance to get your hands on the unit and actually play around with it, put it through its paces, and actually start testing it. So if you are one of the lucky users who have received their 600C Pro, I implore you, go ahead and share your experiences with the other Aputure users on the Aputure user group, in Gaffer Salon, Lighting for Film, on Instagram, wherever, and just share the experience that you've had with the 600C Pro, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are clamoring to get their hands on it and want to know what it's like in the real world. And they can only trust what I say so much, because obviously I love this light. Now, we're going to break down the 600C Pro and everything you need to know about it. And then afterwards, we're going to do a quick Q&A, answering a few questions that you might have. And then right after that, you're going to want to stay tuned, because we're going to be showing you a featurette that we shot with Justin Jones, a cinematographer based in Los Angeles, who actually shot the commercial for the Lightstorm 600C Pro. And we're going to do a deep dive on what it was like to do the virtual production aspects of the 600C Pro commercial at Cinepack Studio during his first virtual production, and how the 600C Pro came to play in that. So without further ado, so you can see what it is that we're talking about, let's roll the commercial.
Full color, full force. In the beginning of Aputure, one dream prevailed. What if one light could do it all? And ever since then, we've been on a journey to create the most versatile fixture in the most rugged body that can be controlled by any means. Every innovation has been another step towards creating the new norm, where cinematographers and creatives everywhere can harness an endless palette while building on the same lighting principles we've known for years. And with it comes new frontiers and a broad spectrum of possibilities. Introducing the Lightstorm 600C Pro, point source RGBWW, and the same classic design you know and love. This new studio-ready fixture represents the pinnacle of Aputure's Lightstorm engineering, implementing our tried-and-true color technology in a fixture with every professional feature we have to offer. The LS600C Pro covers the range of 2300 Kelvin to 10,000 Kelvin, and outputs 5020 lux at 3 meters, or more than 18,360 lux with the LS1200 series narrow reflector. And by sharing the same foundational color science as our other RGBWW units, the 600C Pro maintains our high fidelity spectral standards with stellar SSI scores of 74 in daylight and 85 in tungsten. The 600C Pro's magnesium alloy frame and water-resistant construction make it durable against inclement weather and the fast-paced nature of a film set. And at only 5.9 kilograms, the lamp head is among the lightest of any comparable unit, allowing you to easily rig it on set or in a studio array using its dual junior baby pin and 7.5 meter weatherproof head cable. We've revamped the entire user experience and created a more vivid, streamlined interface that allows you to confirm your color choices at a glance and go into specifics, like the new advanced HSI setting, which allows you to dial in your white point and fine-tune the exact color you want. And say goodbye to swapping gels on set as you're navigating the visual gel library with over 300 industry-standard presets. Once you've locked in your settings, save up to 10 programmable presets to have your preferred looks at the ready. And like all other professional Lightstorm units, the 600C Pro can be powered by standard and high voltage gold and V-mount batteries, and has the ability to charge them when plugged into AC power. With a max power draw of just 720 watts, the 600C Pro can also be powered using a 48-volt, 15-amp DC power station for near silent operation. We've also refined each control method in the LS600C Pro, offering 5-pin DMX, Lumen Radio CRMX, and ArtNet or SACN control via its durable Ethercon port. And of course, the LS600C Pro joins the Aputure family with Sidus Mesh technology and app control, further enhancing the RGBWW ecosystem that already works hand in hand with soft light fixtures like the Nova P600C and mini LEDs like the MC and B7C. Sidus Link brings direct app control to you. No fixtures or dongles, eliminating all barriers between your light and your vision. Finally, the 600C Pro comes complete with the universal Bowens mount and is compatible with Aputure's modifiers like our hyper reflectors, the F10 Fresnel, Light Dome 150, and Lantern 90. It's more than just brightness. It's the ability to say, I want not just blue, but steel blue, or maybe amber. And now, it's coming in more ways than one.
And we're back. So let's get into why I consider the 600C Pro to be the most versatile light in the Aputure product line. So the history of the versatility of the 600C Pro actually stems back to the history of the Lightstorm product line in and of itself. For those of you who may remember, the first Lightstorm Bowens mount point source light that we ever created was something called the 120T. That's what started this whole revolution. When we created the 120T, we wanted to create a light that was starting out as a point source that could use its additional reflector, that could use a Fresnel, but that could also use a softbox, like the Light Dome, the original one. And this is something that we launched alongside the original Aputure Lightstorm 120T, the tungsten version of this lineup that we no longer have in production today, but it's something that created the foundation for everything that is Lightstorm. In fact, YouTubers like Curtis Judd still use the 120T to this day, and it came out way back in 2015 or 2016. When we created the 120T, we really wanted to emphasize the versatility of it by having that point source start that could then be modified with ease. And the 120T evolved into the more popular daylight model, the 120D that everyone has come to know and love. And the 120D Mark I evolved into the 300D Mark I, which was insane amount of output at the time for what a lot of our creators and indie filmmakers had access to. But then we took a lot of that feedback from the 120D Mark I and from the 300D Mark I, and we revamped the 120D to make the 120D Mark II. And likewise, we took feedback from that and revamped the 300D Mark I into the 300D Mark II. And I think that really started the Aputure renaissance and really allowed us to hone in on the design of what makes our products as high level as they are today. And in addition, the 300D Mark II also holds a special place because it was the first Aputure product that integrated Sidus Link app control directly into the device. So it was the first product you could control with your Sidus Link app on your phone or your tablet. Alongside the 300D Mark II, we also launched the 300X, which is our first blended bicolor light that allowed us to use bicolor technology in the point source, but also with our hard light modifiers, like the reflector, like the Fresnel 2X, and like the spotlight mount. But we knew that we couldn't just stop there. We knew that there was more to go with the Lightstorm series, going beyond the 300D Mark II and beyond the 300X. So we asked everyone, how can we make this more professional? What do we need to do to get it onto professional sets? And what do we need to do to make it the light that replaces other lights in your setup? And all that resulted in the 600D Pro. So when we created the 600D Pro, we had a few visions in mind. One was to create a light that could finally compete with traditional HMI fixtures. So it had to be really bright, and have a lot of intensity. It had to be weatherproof because people were using it out in torrential downpours. It had to have professional level connectivity because it needed to integrate directly into people's DMX workflows. And of course, as a Lightstorm product, it needed to have that Bowens mount versatility. It needed to maintain the versatility that we'd held up through the entirety of the Lightstorm line by using the most prolific mount that was on the market. So we created the LS600D Pro and tried to cram everything into it that we could. But that wasn't the end of it. That was still just the daylight 5600 Kelvin fixture of the LS600D Pro. And we knew that, okay, we wanted to expand on this level of product, and we wanted to expand on this level of light. So where did we go from there? We went and expanded the color temperature range. So we blended the optical color blending technology from the LS300X with the 600D Pro, using it to create a 600 watt output bicolor chipset that was blended using our optical color blending prism. And this technology becomes important when you're talking about lights like the 600C Pro as well. We were able to blend the optics together to create a single source that could tune from 2700 Kelvin all the way up to 6500 Kelvin while still maintaining an incredible amount of intensity because of that 600 watt output chipset that allowed it to maintain about 70% of the raw output power of the 600D Pro in daylight intensity, in daylight CCT. So we knew that the 600X Pro was a step beyond the 600D Pro, and it provided a lot of flexibility and versatility beyond just having a daylight unit because it still had that punch while still having that expanded CCT. But we knew that this wouldn't be the end either, because we knew we had to add beyond dual color functionality, go beyond the dual color chipset, go beyond the bicolor light itself, and add an RGB color control. And that's what resulted in the Lightstorm 600C Pro that we have here today. That expanded the color temperature range as well, because it's not only about adding saturated color controls to the light fixture, it also involves adding more accuracy and expanding the range of CCT and white lights that you can create out of this fixture right here. So now the 600C Pro has a color temperature range of 2300 Kelvin all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin, allowing you to get really, really warm beyond 2700, closer to candlelight, and then all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin, getting those ultra cools that you might need in certain situations. So one of the things I want to highlight with the 600C Pro is that, yes, it is a full color light. It is an RGBWW fixture. And that means that it's also able to accurately reproduce white lights to a high degree. And that's how people often use our lights. The Nova P600C, the Nova P300C, the 600C Pro gets used a lot in its full color functionalities. But more often than not, when we hear feedback from gaffers and we hear feedback from users, they're using it to use those high quality white lights in their scene to get in that quality of light as well. And I think that's what we're going to get into as we get further on into the presentation. So let's talk a little bit more about the 600C Pro. And if you want a quick overview, you want a quick TLDR of what the 600C Pro has to offer, and you want a few of the features, you can screenshot this page right here. This is just to give you a quick overview as to what's inside this fixture, but we're going to get into all of this as we go on anyways. So let's start off with what makes it the most versatile light, because it's not just the full color control, it's the full color control combined with the Bowens mount compatibility. So the 600C Pro is capable of utilizing the hyperreflectors that are of course included inside the 600C Pro case. So with the 600C Pro, you're going to get the LS600 series reflector. It's the same reflector you get with the 600D Pro, the 600X Pro, and the standard version of the 600D, but they all operate with the reflector a little bit differently. And in addition, because the 600C Pro, in order to get that 600 watt full color output, has 1800 watts of total LED power inside the chipset. That's 600 watt of warm white, 600 watts of cool white, and then 600 watts of combined RG and B. And that's what gives it a little bit beefier of a size, but also what makes it compatible really nicely with the LS1200D series reflectors. So as you can see right here on the presentation slide, you can see this photo of the 600C Pro with the BM1215 hyperreflector. And as we'll get into the illuminance numbers a little bit later, this combination will prove to be the most intense combination you can get out of this light. So if you need to throw light more forward and you need that narrow beam angle, this is the reflector you're going to want to use. This is the modifier you're going to want to use with the 600C Pro. But it's not always about intensity and illumination, because if you want intensity, reflectors are always going to be more efficient than putting glass in between. But it's sometimes about the quality of the light as well. And that's where the F10 Fresnel comes in. Just like with the 1200D Pro, the F10 Fresnel is compatible with the LS600C Pro. to get you that really creamy quality of light that you get out of the Fresnel. So this is a true 10-inch glass Fresnel that is now full color compatible with the LS600C Pro. And because of the larger chipset with the 600C Pro, you are going to get a slightly different spot flood range of 25 degrees to 70 degrees, which is wider than that of the 600D Pro, because the 600D Pro can get more intensity and get more of a narrow beam angle with that 15 degree to 45 degree range. But you still get the same Fresnel quality of light out of the 600C Pro, and it's still cuttable with the F10 barn doors. So you can mount the F10 barn doors to the F10 Fresnel and use it to cut the 600C Pro and get that nice Fresnel quality of light. The same spot flood range and everything that you come to use and know about the helicoid design of the F10 Fresnel. But going beyond hard light fixtures as well, hard light modifiers, you can of course use the 600C Pro and turn it from a point source hard light into a soft light with ease and without any obstacles at all. The 600C Pro is of course compatible with our whole range of light domes, from the Light Dome 2 to the Light Dome 150, Light Octadome 120, which is our 4-foot octadome, the Lightbox 60x90, which is a 2x3 rectangular softbox, and the Lightbox 30x120, which is a 1x4-foot strip box. So anything ranging from a circular dome to a rectangular box, you can use it with the 600C Pro. And one of the real advantages that you have with the 600C Pro, because of its full color capabilities, is gelling. A lot of people, I'm sure you know, who have tried to gel a 600D Pro or 600X Pro inside of one of these light domes is going to have a hard time because of that massive heat output that those lights have. At 600 watts, whether it's an LED, whether it's an HMI, whether it's a tungsten light, they're all going to output a lot of heat. And especially with saturated gels, they have a high tendency to melt under that heat, even with some heat shield. So while a Light Dome 150 doesn't include a gel holder for that reason, the 600C Pro has come to solve those problems for the light domes and add in that gel functionality, whether you're tuning in a color using advanced HSI or XY, or you're actually selecting a gel preset from the gel library. This is in hopes of making that whole process a lot easier. And gelling lanterns is the hardest of all, and that's where the LS600C Pro can really aid in that as well. When combined with the lantern or lantern 90, you can turn your lantern to any color temperature, which I know is a hard thing to do with the 600D Pro or 600X Pro, because there's no feasible, easy way to, inside the lantern, mount a gel without the 600-watt chipset really overheating that gel and causing it to melt and fall out and cause a lot of issues on your set. That's where the 600C Pro can save the day. And of course, the 600C Pro is also compatible with a wide variety of other third-party manufacturer modifiers, like from DOP Choice and the Rabbit Rounder series, or from Chimera and the rest of their Bowens mount softboxes. But what I really want to talk about when it comes to the soft light modifiers is that this is where you see the proportional output differences between the 600C Pro and the 600X Pro and the 600D Pro. With no modifiers, no accessories, so it's just the bare bulb, the 600D Pro can output about 2,600 lux at a distance of 3 meters, or 9.8 feet, or 10 feet. The 600X Pro, conversely, can output 1,880 lux at that same distance, and the 600C Pro measures in at about 1,937 lux at that same distance. This means that in terms of raw output power with no reflector, the 600X Pro and 600C Pro are actually about 70% of the output capacity of the 600D Pro when it comes to 5600 Kelvin daylight, which is going to be the brightest color temperature portion of that entire range for both the 600X Pro and the 600C Pro. So this means when you're using it inside a soft light modifier like the lanterns, like the light domes, you're going to see that proportional difference in output of about 70% of the same intensity at 5600 Kelvin. It's once you start throwing on the optical modifiers like the F10 Fresnel, like the spotlight mount, like the reflectors, that you're going to see differences not only in beam angle, but also intensity due to that beam angle shifting and ultimately resolving from the difference in sizes of the chipsets and therefore being optimized for different reflectors. For example, if you throw the 1200D Pro reflector on the 600C Pro, it's going to work a lot more evenly than you would if you threw it on the 600D Pro or 600X Pro, just because those have smaller chipsets. So that's something to keep in mind when you're talking about the different intensities with everything. It ultimately comes down to how you're going to use it. So the 600C Pro has a bare bulb intensity of 1937 lux at 3 meters with an approximate beam angle of 93 degrees. So this is with no accessories. And then once you focus that in a little bit more, you can focus it in with the LS600 series reflector to get a beam angle of about 62 degrees and 5020 lux at 3 meters. Then you can concentrate even more with the BM1230 medium reflector from the LS1200D Pro and get about 6150 lux at 3 meters with a 53 degree beam angle. And then if you want the highest intensity combination of the 600C Pro and the 1200D Pro, you're going to want to throw on the 1200D Pro BM1215 hyperreflector. Sorry, I said 1200D Pro the other time. The BM1215 hyperreflector narrow, which is going to get you 18,360 lux at 3 meters with an approximately 23 degree beam angle compared to the wider beam angle of the 600 series Pro reflector. Now I'm throwing around a lot of numbers here. 18,000 lux, 3 meters, 23 degree beam angle. What does this mean for you in practical use case? I think that's something that you're going to want to test yourself and get your hands on the unit, because all these numbers can look like gobbledygook, but what you'll find is that when you test the unit, when you put it through its places and you actually use it in your scene, you're going to have plenty of output for what you need to do, especially if you're used to using lights like the 600D Pro, 600X Pro, or Nova P600C in a lot of these situations. It's really going to come down to comparing lights in a practical use case rather than comparing beam angles to different reflectors, to different intensities and different lux at certain numbers, just purely because different lights, due to the size of the chipsets with different reflectors, are going to give you different beam angles, and it's going to change everything. And it's not always about intensity, it's also about the quality of the light and the color quality and the color science. So like with every other Aputure fixture, you're going to get, of course, an average CRI of at least 95, an average TLCI of at least 95. In this case, we have an average TLCI of 98. But these metrics are only good up to about CRI and TLCIs of 95. Once you get above a CRI and TLCI of 95, the metrics stop being able to tell the difference between different lights and their different qualities, and even in relation just to daylight or tungsten light, because that's what we're measuring against as their perfect standards in the world. So let's take a look at the spectral power distributions of the 600C Pro just to give you a quick rundown. It has a D56 SSI of 74 and an SSI in tungsten of 85. So measuring amongst the highest in color mixing lights in terms of spectral power reproduction when it comes to daylight or when it comes to tungsten. So this is where the light really, really shines. And comparative to lights like the Nova P600C, you have that SSI of 74 for daylight. You have the SSI of 85 for tungsten. And we'll get to the actual graphs of the spectrums in a little bit. But this shows that it kind of matches on par with our Nova lights, but also on par with some of the best lights in the industry. This is, I swear, the only comparison we're going to make to any other light. That is to the Airy Orbiter and their advanced RGB ACL technology. As you can see, the CRI of Airy's light, 98. TLCI, 95. So stacking up really well against in that regard. But you can also see with their broad end red for their RGB ACL technology, they're also hitting SSIs of D56 to F75 and an SSI tungsten of 85. So whether you're using an RGB ACL technology like the Airy Orbiter, or you're using the L600C Pro and all of our extended line of RGBWW lights from the 600C Pro to the Nova P600C to the Amaran F22C, you're going to get that stellar white light color quality out of this fixture. Because at the end of the day, when we talk to gaffers, when we talk to users, most of the time users are using it as a white light fixture with accurate colors and that's able to accurately track the planking curve, and then 10% of the time or 20% of the time with those saturated colors. And where that RGB really comes in is in being able to aid the existing white light chips that can already produce a lot of intensity, can already produce a really pure white, by tracking the planking curve as you move throughout the entire CCT range. So if you want to look at what the numbers show, because numbers 74, 85, they're just percentages in this case. What does the spectrum actually look like? This is an example of the spectrum out of the LS600C Pro at 5600 Kelvin, or more specifically for this spectrum, it's 5603 degrees Kelvin, measured with a Sekonics C7000 spectrometer, which is basically the industrial version of the Sekonics C800 industry standard spectrometer that everyone is using on set. And when you look at the tungsten spectral power distribution of the light, you can see how we compare as well. That white line represents what a traditional tungsten black body light would look like, the traditional black body curve of a tungsten light. And you can see that throughout the meat of the spectrum, we're matching really, really well, especially towards that broad edge of the red. A lot of issues that people can run into when you're looking with narrow band red LEDs is that the red LED can only reproduce via a narrow band if it's not a phosphor coated red LED, and that means that it's only spiking in roughly that 620 to 630 nanometer range depending on which chip you use. When other manufacturers, whether it be us or other manufacturers who use RGBWW, use a really warm white light for that white light chipset in the WW, then we're also able to expand and broaden up that range beyond red, beyond that 620 nanometers, and really beef up that portion of the spectrum when it comes to tungsten light reproduction. And that's why we're able to hit that number of 85, because we're really using that white light of the 2500 Kelvin chipset inside the LS600C Pro and broadening the spectrum on when it comes to the lower frequencies, the longer wavelengths of the 600C Pro. Now, we talked a lot about the color science and the output and the color of the 600C Pro. What makes it a professional light that you can use at the end of the day? Because at the end of the day, we can talk about specs all you want. How can you use this light in everyday applications and in practical use cases? Like the 600D Pro and 600X Pro, the 600C Pro also features a weather-resistant construction using a durable magnesium alloy for the shell. For those of you who remember your 5D Mark IIIs, so those of you who remember your Nikon D750s, those are made with magnesium alloy shells because they're super lightweight and durable for those heavy-duty DSLR cameras. And the 600C Pro, 600D Pro, 600X Pro use the same material as the main construction of the shell. They are, of course, weather resistant, like I mentioned, and include a 7.5 meter long weatherproof head cable. Now, how can people tell how weather resistant the 600C Pro is? I've seen people use the 600C Pro in the snow. I've seen them use it in the torrential downpour in the Midwest. And I've even heard a horrifying story of someone who left their 600D Pros in their truck bed overnight. It rained, and when they picked up the lights the next morning, they were dripping wet. But they were ready to go 1 hour later when they started shooting. And I think that's just a testament to how much faith Aputure users can put in the Lightstorm Pro product line, especially the 600D Pro, 600X Pro, 600C Pro, and even the 1200D Pro, which is IP54 rated. And of course, it goes from everything inside the weather-resistant internals to the weather-resistant covers that you have on all the ports, ranging from the head cable port to the Ethercon port that you have on the side of the control box. That is a more durable Ethernet connection than just standard Ethernet connection because of the XLR shell that is used in all Nutric Ethercon ports. Now, let's dive further into the control box and talk about what makes it different and what sets it apart. As you can see, for the most part, the control box is actually really similar to that of the LS600D Pro, minus the fact that there's that rainbow ring on the side, on the front of the control box that signifies that it is a 600C Pro control box. It looks pretty much the same. So that means, of course, it has a lot of those same features that we have in all of our Lightstorm lights and all of the Aputure lights in general, including 4 dimming curves, linear, exponential, log, and S-curve. 4 fan modes, smart, which is an auto-modulating fan mode, medium, which is a constant fan mode for when you're indoors and under 35 degrees Celsius of ambient temperature, which is about 93 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who are imperially inclined. And then, of course, high fan speed mode, which is good up to 45 degrees Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's still another constant fan speed. Or even silent, where you turn off the fan completely and limit the output of the 600C Pro for when you need absolute silence in your work. The 600C Pro, like our other lights, also features frequency selection, which allows you to adjust the dimming of the PWM module by up to 2000 Hertz. So you're adjusting the frequency that the PWM is operating at, and that can help you tune out some of the flicker and banding that you may get in certain shooting situations. And of course, inside the same control box is actually a little bit lighter than the 600D Pro and 600X Pro as well. But where does it match up with some of the more advanced features that are in the product lines, like the 600X Pro and the Nova P600C? Like those two lights, the 600C Pro has 2 output modes, max and constant output mode. And this is pertinent for the lights with large expanded CCT ranges. So like the P600C and like the LS600X Pro, when you set the light to max output, you're going to get the most amount of intensity that you can get at any given Kelvin point in the CCT range. So particularly at 5600 Kelvin or at 7500 Kelvin, that's when you're going to get the most intensity out of the 600C Pro, especially if you put it in max output mode. But if you need precision and you need tunability and you need in-camera effects that don't change the illumination of the light no matter what CCT you set it to, you can set it to constant output mode, and that will limit the overall luminance of every single CCT value to be the same, so that you can make sure that everything is as precise as you left it, no matter what color temperature you're changing your light fixture to. And of course, like the P600C, as a full color light, we put in user programmable presets, but in this case, because it's all in software, we actually have 10 user programmable presets that we'll talk about in just a little bit. One of the big things that was a change in the control box is actually not in terms of the hardware, but in terms of the software and the user experience and the user interface. And I think we've been getting a lot of feedback from gaffers and creators who have had a chance to use the 600C Pro and have said that it is the most intuitive Aputure light and intuitive light period that they've used to date. They've really liked the user interface of the 600C Pro, and we really worked hard on it. Because when you get to some of these more advanced features, we considered back and forth, does it need as many knobs as the P300C, as the P600C? Because once you get to these modes where you're getting more than 4 or more parameters, the knobs get confusing and they get clunky. So we kind of pulled back, took a look at it, and said, how can we simplify this to make the most intuitive user interface for our users? So we limited it back down to 1 control knob for 1 user interface experience, so you knew exactly where to go, and then redesigned the software to highlight that experience. So of course, in your standard light mode, in your white light mode, with CCT and green magenta shift control, you can see on the full color LCD display the 2300 Kelvin to 10,000 Kelvin range that you can tune between. And of course, you can also choose, below that you can see the green magenta ring. So you can actually see if you're tuning towards green or you're tuning toward magenta when you're using the CCT and GM shift mode. So this is a great example of how the new interface is allowing you to see exactly what you're doing. But it goes beyond the CCT mode, because that's where it's probably the least useful. Where it's the most useful is in something like your gel presets. Like this Nova P300C and the Nova P600C, the LS600C Pro has access to our library of over 300 gel presets. And if you've used Sidus Link before to control those lights and select gels for those lights, you've appreciated the fact that you can preview the colors and preview the gels directly on your phone or your iPad. And now with the full LCD display inside the 600C Pro, you're actually able to see and preview these gels on this light fixture as well. So you can go in, you can select your base Kelvin, you can select 3200 Kelvin, 5600 Kelvin, and you go in and select your gel library and your gel series that you want to look at, and then choose a gel based on your eye. You don't have to memorize the gel name, you don't have to memorize the gel color. You can choose everything just based off of how it looks to you on set when you're using it. And this also plays into when you're using the advanced HSI functions in the advanced HSI light mode. In advanced HSI, the main difference between a standard HSI light mode is the fact that you can actually change your desaturated CCT value. So with the Nova P300C and the Amaran P60C, when you're setting your HSI, you can of course move your light around the color wheel. You can choose your hue based off of that. You can change your saturation to move it in and out of towards the center of the circle if you want it desaturated, and towards the edges of the circle if you want it more saturated. But with the advanced HSI mode, you can actually tune your CCT white point that you're desaturating to. So instead of automatically desaturating to D65 as a standard, you can desaturate to 2300 Kelvin, 2700 Kelvin, 3200 Kelvin, which is especially important if you're working in a very warm, very Kelvin, very tungsten-based scene, instead of desaturating towards a bright white daylight, which throws off the whole color balance of the look that you're going for. That's where the advanced HSI comes into play, and being able to tune your CCT alongside your HSI. And that's where the full color LCD display also comes into play, with you being able to actually move around the color wheel and see what color you're picking, and then move towards the center for desaturation or move towards the edges for more saturation. This is also helpful, of course, in XY mode. XY mode is a super complicated mode, and it's a super advanced mode where you want to be able to precisely pinpoint the coordinate that you want to match between all of your fixtures. And now with the full color LCD display, you can see exactly where you are, what coordinate you're picking on the CIE 1931 XY graph. So with XY mode, you're able to say, I want to move towards the left, I want to move down to get closer to that blue range, I want to move towards the right to get closer to that magenta, rather than having to memorize the numbers on your head, or to use the Sidus Link app to tell you exactly where things should be. This makes it a lot easier to match with your LS600C Pro with your other lights. And of course, this full color functionality in the display extends to the RGB mode, where you're going to be able to get a swatch as you tune the R, you tune the G, you tune the B, the red, the green, the blue diodes individually. You're going to see in a color swatch on the screen exactly what color you're going to get out of your light fixture. And like I mentioned as well, you have up to 10 user programmable light presets. So in addition to the inbuilt presets that you have with the 600C Pro, including xenon, including daylight, including cloudy, including bioluminescent light, you can select your own user programmable presets. So you can load up to 10 of them, save up to 10 of them, and recall them from any single mode. You can save a advanced HSI parameter, you can save an XY parameter, you can save an RGB parameter, or you can even save a lighting effect parameter, of which there are 15, just like the Nova P300C, ranging from paparazzi all the way to color chase and party lights, as it is a fully functional, professional level, full color light. Now, we've talked a lot about how you can control the lights on the control box using the new user interface, but we've also mentioned the professional level connectivity earlier on in the presentation. What does that mean for you when you're using it on set? With the 600 series Pro series, with any Aputure light that says Pro in the name, and which with most Aputure lights going forward, we make sure to include the most advanced CRMX chip inside of it. So we're using Lumen Radio CRMX TMO2 chips inside each of these lights. And because the fixture is weather resistant, that means your CRMX chip is too. You don't have to worry about any DMX dongles that may or may not have their own weather resistance rating separate from your light fixture. If you're gonna put this guy in the rain, your CRMX is also gonna work in the rain as well. Now, when you're controlling this light, whether it be wireless using CRMX or hardwire, you're going to want precise control because it is a full color fixture with full XY control. So we have 16-bit dimming as well in the DMX profiles. So you have 16-bit and 8-bit alternatives for all DMX profiles, whether you're using CRMX, using the built-in 5-pin XLR in and outs, or you're using the ArtNet or ACM protocols via the EtherCom port. You're going to be able to use any of these 11 DMX profiles in both 8 and 16-bit alternatives. But I have a feeling that most of you are going to be using it in CCT and RGB and CCT HSI modes more often than not. And of course, it wouldn't be an Aputure fixture if it didn't, of course, also have Sidus Link direct app control. With Sidus Link app control, you can connect directly to this light, no transmitters, no dongles. You just need your phone or your iPad to connect directly to this light and control up to multiple lights at once because of that Bluetooth mesh network. In fact, that's what Toei was using to control the lights earlier on in the presentation. When we triggered that lighting setup, that was all done using Sidus Link and Magic Program. When we triggered this key light turning on, again, that was done using Sidus Link and Magic Program to trigger everything and make this a very cohesive looking scene. And that shows the power that you can use Sidus Link with. I use Sidus Link to control the lights at Cinegear. I've used Sidus Link on set with Justin Jones. I've used Sidus Link to control the lighting setups here. Sidus Link has a lot of capabilities, and for easy access control and immediate control as well, if you're not wanting to set up an entire DMX workflow with Lumen Radio, especially if you have a smaller number of lights, Sidus Link app control can definitely get you there in a lot of situations. Now, we talked about how to control the light wirelessly or remotely. How do you power this beast of a light? Because it does have 600 watts of total power output. To power the 600 watt chipset, the Lightstorm 600C Pro, like the D Pro, like the X Pro, and like the Nova P600C, all have a power supply that can draw up to 720 watts of maximum power. But this doesn't mean that it's running at 720 watts all the time. In fact, more often than not, the 600C Pros, the 600D, 600X, and Nova P600C run at an average nominal power draw of 650 to 660 watts. And that's what actually makes them compatible with power solutions like the Gen Energy Monster Kit, which is a 48-volt power solution that can deliver up to 650 watts of continuous power via the 3-pin XLR that matches up with the 3-pin XLR on the bottom of the Lightstorm 600C Pro. You can also power the 600C Pro using the multi-voltage battery plates that are on the sides of every LS600 series control box. These multi-voltage battery plates accept 14.4 volt, 26 volt, and 28.8 volts, so you don't have to worry about whatever batteries you're throwing on here. They're going to probably work with the 600C Pro. Now, if you want to activate full power, you have to go into the menu, into the battery options, and select that you want to activate full power with the 600C Pro, because you're going to have to fulfill a couple of requirements once you do that. You're going to want to make sure that your batteries can deliver 360 watts of output each. So that means 26-volt batteries that can deliver about 18 amps of continuous power, or 28.8-volt batteries that can deliver about 15 to 16 amps of continuous power. Now, if you're running at half power or using standard 14.4-volt batteries like you would with the 300D Mark II or the 300X, that can still run the 600C Pro at half power as long as you have a 14.4-volt 15-amp battery. Like I also said, the 600C Pro can also use the 3-pin XLR 48-volt input to power the light, whether you're using a Gen Energy Monster kit or you're using a Bloch battery, their 1500 watt-hour big Bloch battery with their 48-volt inverter in order to get enough power to juice up the 600C Pro. But also unique to the 600C Pro is the fact that these battery plates, these multi-voltage battery plates, can deliver power in the opposite direction, meaning that you can charge up those 14.4-volt and 26-volt batteries using these battery plates when it's plugged into AC power. And it's doing this by determining the top end and low end voltage of the batteries. So it's going to get you a lot of the way there when you are in a pinch and needing to travel light, not wanting to carry an extra charger. And if you're willing to basically charge up your batteries overnight using your beast of a light, you can definitely do that if you're in a rush and in a pinch. Now, the 600C Pro, like I said, is what I consider the most versatile light in the entire Aputure product line, and it really fills in a lot of gaps. It fulfills that full color functionality that we needed out of point source lights, and it really completed that Lightstorm 600 series trio. So you can choose whether you want a daylight only light for the most intensity, whether you want a bicolor light for that flexibility and simplicity, or you want this full color fixture that can really get you to success in a lot of different situations, no matter what modifiers you're using. But the 600C Pro also fulfills another category inside the Aputure lineup because it fulfilled the fact that we now have a product in pretty much every major form factor with full color functionality, whether it's a point source light like the 600C Pro, whether it's a soft panel like the Nova P600C, whether it is a flexible LED mat like the Amaran F21C or F22C, a hard panel like the Amaran P60C, or even a tube like the Amaran T2C. Now that the 600C Pro is here, we've rounded out pretty much every major form factor in the Aputure and Amaran product lines, all with full color. So this is to say that when you are in the Aputure and Amaran ecosystems, whether you're using any one of these form factors of lights or using them all in tandem, all in combination, you can rest assured that they're going to sync up well. Whether you're using Sidus Link or DMX, they're going to deliver you a consistent experience that you can come to expect from Aputure and Amaran, and that we're going to keep advancing all of these technologies and all of these form factors going forward into the future, because it's never about being satisfied with what we have right now. It's always about delivering the best experience for our users at the end of the day, and hoping that in the future we can keep advancing and moving forward together as an industry. So, like we said, if the 600C Pro is here to complete the Aputure family in terms of all these form factors. If you need to use any of them together, this is now a fully fledged ecosystem that you can use for your filmmaking, for your content creating applications. And like I had mentioned earlier, we started shipping the 600C Pro just a week ago. We've fulfilled a lot of the pre-orders starting June 30th. So if you are putting an order now, you're probably going to get on your dealer's wait list. But I recommend that you do it as soon as possible. Get in line and make sure you get yourself put on that wait list. This light is only $2,490, so that's only $800 more than the Lightstorm 600D Pro. Now, let's get to if there are any user questions that we had during this live stream. What do we got?
The first question is, what's your favorite gel?
Cool. So one of the questions is, it's a fun one, it's a light one. What is my favorite gel? For me personally, my favorite gel is actually not like a super hard party gel. It's actually low sodium or high sodium or urban sodium, those sodium vapor type gels, particularly because I can get consistent results when using them amongst the same lights or even amongst lights from other manufacturers. Especially now that in Los Angeles, all those old sodium vapor lights have been replaced with these ugly green LEDs, and I can't get that look when shooting anymore. And when I tried to build my own sodium vapor light, I realized that there was a lot of banding happening, and because of the frequency that the light operated at. So I stick with the high sodium, low sodium, and urban sodium gels that you can find with the 600C Pro and the Nova P600C. Justin Jones' favorite gel, though, you'll come to learn inside the video, is Peacock Blue. So interesting note. Okay, cool. What else do we got? How does the 600C Pro compare to the Nova series, especially the Nova P600C? That's a great question. They both have 600C in the name. What the heck is the difference? The Lightstorm 600C Pro is a point source Bowens mount full RGBWW light, while the Nova P600C is a soft panel light, like we showed you earlier on in the presentation. It still has the same color control. The 600 in both of their names means they both have 600 watts of total LED power output, and the C in the name refers to that full color control. Now, why would I choose one over the other? That's a fantastic question. I would say in terms of versatility, the 600C Pro gets you a lot further because it can be a hard light and it can also be a soft light. Luke Searville from Meet the Gaffer, a San Francisco-based gaffer, did a comparison of the 600C Pro and the Nova P600C, put them both in a softbox, and when they were used with DOP Choice 3-foot octaboxes, he was getting approximately the same output between the two fixtures, which makes sense because they both have 600 watts of RGBWW output. But where the 600C Pro really shines is the fact that it can still create hard light and can throw the light a lot further, especially if you throw something like the F10 Fresnel or you throw the LS1200 series hyperreflector onto the fixture. But where would I use the Nova P600C instead? The Nova P600C is an inherently soft light and a much more compact package, an all-in-one package, because you just need to plug in the power cable and you're good to go. So if I'm rigging up a studio with a bunch of cyc lights, I'm going to use the Nova P600C because it's going to give me a much smaller footprint than having to put a softbox on all of the LS600C Pros, whereas I might use the 600C Pros for effects, or especially as my key light, because I can throw on any size of softbox I need, while the P600Cs light up the background. So it's whether you want the versatility and the smaller form factor of the 600C Pro, or you need something that's immediately soft and always ready to go like the Nova P600C, that's kind of where I would look to in terms of the two different options that you have when it comes to our 600 watt full color lights in the Aputure product line. Both of them have Lumen Radio CRMX, so they're both easily controllable via your DMX workflow, or whether you're using them with Sidus Link. What else do we got? Okay, in terms of battery options, I had mentioned that there are V-mount and gold mount options, which is the standard that we have for a long time. But now that more B-mount options are coming out, now that the new Alexa 35 is out, will there be B-mount compatibility in the future? So to clarify for everyone, I'm not saying V-mount, I'm saying B-mount, which is the new battery standard that Arri made with Bebop for 24 volt or 28 volt batteries. I think that's a question that actually I can direct back to you. Right now, there are no plans to make this light in B-mount, but is that something that you deem necessary? Is that something that you think would actually make this fixture better and that you can see yourself using a lot in the future now that Alexa 35s are getting out and now that other battery manufacturers are making B-mount variations of their batteries? Is a B-mount version useful? You tell me. I'm excited to hear the results. I want to know what you think. Okay, and we get time for one more question. Okay. Can you talk about the compatibility with the F10 Fresnel and the spotlight mount for the 600C Pro? So I mentioned before, the F10 Fresnel is compatible with the 600C Pro. Due to the fact that it has a larger chipset, it makes it so that it's less optimized for the F10 Fresnel than the 600D Pro, for example. With the 600C Pro, you're going to get that wider spot flood range of 25 degrees to 70 degrees, whereas with the 600D Pro, you're going to get that 15 to 45 degree spot flood range. And you're also going to get a lot more intensity and a lot more magnification out of the 600D Pro with the F10 Fresnel. With the L600C Pro, it is going to be wider, but you're still going to get that same type of quality, but the intensity and magnification, especially due to the wider beam angle, is going to be less as well. Whereas with the spotlight mount, I've seen people use them in certain situations, and especially if they have gobos, whether they be metal gobos or glass gobos inside the spotlight mount for certain effects. But the LS600C Pro is not fully compatible with the spotlight mount for super clean projections throughout the entirety of the range. That's something that we're going to have to wait on just a little bit more. I can't tell you too much yet, but we do have something coming down the road, more optics coming for lights like the 1200D Pro and the 600C Pro. But that's all the information I can give you, otherwise someone's gonna get me in trouble. So that's the last question that we have for everyone here. Again, stay tuned, stay on the line so you can watch Justin Jones talk about what it was like to use the 600C Pro when shooting the 600C Pro commercial, particularly in that virtual production setup that they did at Cinepak Studios. So you're gonna see Justin, me, again, and Tway talk all about what it was like to do virtual production with our brand new light right here. So let's roll the video.
All right, Brandon, we're here, North Hollywood, in another studio, back at it again. What do you think today is going to be about?
Well, last time you brought me over to a studio, it was to use a robotic camera arm alongside the 1200D Pro. So I'm guessing this time it's for something equally as technologically advanced. And given all the cool stuff happening in the industry right now, my first guess is LED video wall.
Yes, virtual production. Everybody's been thinking about the future and how to innovate in a space that lets you pretty much shoot anywhere you want in the world, right? You could be in a club, you could be in a city, you could be in a dark forest, which is exactly where we were in these past few days at the time of this recording, where me and Justin shot the LS600C Pro commercial to show off the versatility of this new hard color unit to show you how it can be used in a virtual production sense. You saw the commercial. How do you think we used it?
Well, in each of the environments, you used more hard light than I expected. So I'm guessing this is where, instead of using a Nova P600C, which is a soft area panel light, the LS600C Pro, being a point source light and being modifiable with a Fresnel or with a softbox, came into play a lot more to give you those nice spots.
You're gonna see how easy it was to fine tune the colors that we wanted on set really quickly, as well as seeing me, Justin, and Andy from Cinepacks pull together our collective brains to work in virtual production and learn Unreal Engine, because it's actually more accessible than you might think it is.
Really? Okay, let's find out,
Let's do it.
So Andy, like Toy said earlier, we're here at Cinepacks Studios, which is your space. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and about Cinepacks?
My name's Andy. I'm a co-owner and co-founder of Cinepacks. We started as a digital asset company where we made like LUTs and stuff like that. And then we kind of branched out and started doing physical products, lens filters. And then we kind of just kept going and started making film studios, places for us to shoot our own stuff, as well as rent out for other people, other creatives to use. So this is our newest place. And we have a big video wall.
One of the reasons that we're here today, like Toy had already mentioned, is because we're shooting with virtual production and your LED wall. So can you tell me a little bit about how you evolved into that?
Yeah, so when The Mandalorian came out, there was a lot of kind of hype, a lot of videos, a lot of BTS that kind of explained the technology, but it seemed really inaccessible. That gave us the first kind of step into playing around with this tech. Yeah.
So now when you're shooting at Cinepacks, you have everything you need, like on site, including the video wall, tech, lighting, etc.
Yeah, pretty much. We have our own computer system that's loaded up with all the Unreal assets. We have our camera trackers that's rigged up to the lighting grid. We have our own in-house like rental, like grip and lighting. It's all Aputure lights. Our entire rental package is all Aputures. And yeah, we also have in-house cameras and stuff, so people can rent our cameras if they want to use our stuff.
Okay, so people can come here for a one-stop shop for moderate to entry-level video production for virtual production.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds cool. Let's get into the workflow for what we did for the past couple of days then.
This is like a little cyberpunk Neo Tokyo type set. So this whole map was built using pre-made assets from Kit Bash. Josh over here put in all the virtual production assets and settings that we needed to get the HTC Vive trackers to work.
I made a 3D model of our video wall. It's flat on the first few panels, I forget exactly, and this is 5 degrees each panel once it starts curving, and then I just did the math in Blender, made it, put it in Unreal, and then it automatically just maps everything out.
Obviously, what I see when I'm shooting as a cinematographer is I just see the camera, I see the wall. What goes into it from your technician side?
Yeah, so we have everything running off of Unreal Engine here. So yeah, like you said, we have the LED wall right here, and then we have virtual cameras. There's a track camera, and then we also set things up on an iPad, so you can digitally just move the entire stage. You can change focal length, like quality of certain things to make sure that you have better performance. You can change the intensity of light. So you can basically change anything that's in Unreal and just put it on this iPad.
So obviously virtual production is like primarily 2 key components. One is the background of the LED wall that everyone always talks about. But then, like we mentioned before, you have to gen lock it and sync it up with your camera, and if you want the lights that you have in the scene. So can you walk through a little bit of how
that process works. Yeah, so I mean the camera, there's not too much besides just the tracker and the Genlock signal that comes into this.
Okay.
The Genlock, pretty much, we have a Blackmagic sync generator that just sends a signal to all the devices to make sure all the frames start exactly the same place.
Okay, and then one of the cool things you mentioned beyond the camera, because everyone's seen cameras track, but one of the really interesting things y'all did was you mounted a tracker to our actual light fixture. So it's not only affecting the scene in real life, what you see on camera, but it's also affecting the background. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So it's basically the same concept, except a lot more simple because there's not really too many like crazy settings that you need to do other than just the position, obviously. Like I said, with the iPad, we can set the parameters of the light to change it to, so that way you have like intensity, color, like whatever you want. Like if you see in Unreal, like basically you have the camera that's gonna be here and then the light in the same spot. So you'll actually see in digital space as well exactly where the camera is and the lights are.
What's up, my guy? And we're going to talk about what it was like for the both of us, our first time with virtual production and setting up the scene here and everything that we had to think about on the day of.
To start off, I haven't done this before, I've seen it, right? Yeah. So I kind of just wanted to wrap my head around what goes into something like this. So I ended up hitting up Andy, a communication with Andy, me, Josh, figuring out what these backgrounds would be, the cities would be, was kind of just my first step into it, right? Just wrapping your brain around the technology so then you can then utilize it on set.
So the first thing that you're facing with was like the angle, right? The angle of things like we're looking down the street. That was the first point of realism in the virtual production sense. So the second thing was like your lens field of view, right? Right. You had to communicate that to the text so that everything would look correctly in terms of what the angle was.
Yeah, so I think the first step is like when your camera is tracked and you choose a lens choice, you have to communicate that to the tech so that he can then give you the field of view that you would get, say, from a 50mm lens, right? Yeah. If you have a 50mm lens on and you have like a 20mm lens in there, the perspective is going to be off.
And so now the third thing that you had to think of, depth of field.
With camera, we're shooting at a 2. I chose to shoot at a lower t-stop to blur out the background and the pixels on the wall, right? If you're too like stopped down, not shallow enough, you could run into the fact of seeing like the pixels. And so in camera, it obviously looks different in person, but when you're in the tracked camera, all the stuff starts to line up and it starts to kind of blend into one, right? That's the whole point of this, is we're trying to make this look real without actually being in Neon Tokyo. So to start off, I knew I wanted to have some kind of stylized moonlight in this, right? We're in this like futuristic Tokyo city. I feel like just like a white moonlight wouldn't really add anything, right? We're gonna add something that has a little bit of style to it. So I had the guys add an actual moonlight into the set, and then I had them give me that like peacock neon blue color.
Okay, your favorite blue gel.
Yeah, I love it. It's my favorite from Alive, yeah. So what we did is we added a Nova P600. And that is going to be basically just wrapping that around and bringing that into our actual physical world. I like going in and lighting with my practicals, right? So my moonlight and then any lights that are going to be in frame, practical lights. So I had the guys add, if you see this over here, we have this like glowing orb, and it's just a sign that's like a lit up sign on a building, right? The reason why I did that is because I needed some kind of edge light on my talent. Just to separate him and make sure that he wasn't, so flatly lit.
Yeah, but back up a second. You told me that you just added this light so you could add a real life practical and motivate it. So you just were able to add something into your scene.
Yeah, just like that. The guys can literally move it around. You want to move it really quick? Oh, that would have been perfect if it moved. Now the light's gone, right? So you can see this is also emitting light and showing like the reflections on the bike and the reflections on the environment are also going to be added to this, but then we add the extra source to really just give that punch. So I had them just move that in here, stick it to the side of this building to give me something to motivate that backlight from. So this is actually really cool what we did here. Now, as you can see, our video wall ends right there before this wall here. So that's the end of our world that we can see. But real life objects like this glass on the telephone booth, reflections are gonna see what reflections see. Since we don't have like a rolling video wall or a separate piece of video wall that we can move around to get into those reflections, what are some lights that can look like they're in there but don't necessarily have to be the video wall? So as you can see, we have these letters here. It says like coffee or something, but it's neon lights and they're yellow.
We're gonna bring in these tube
Bring
lights
in
that
some
are the
tubes
same color.
that will be the same color, that will look like neons, that are gonna extend our world in the reflection. The last couple lights are actually
more? Okay.
inside the booth. So if we go ahead and get in there. Okay, so as we get, so moving on, the last sources that I need, when he walks into the telephone booth, he was really dark. There's nothing overhead, and in almost every telephone booth you see, there's always gonna be like a fluorescent fixture up in the top.
Yeah.
So now that is not portrayed in our city, right? This is now just physical lighting and bringing us back to our roots, right? Like we're in this crazy world, but you know, we're still lighting a physical space here.
Yeah.
So up inside there, we have an MT Pro, and that is set to HSI.
Light, yeah?
Yeah, it is a new light. We have that up top there, that's pushing down kind of this fluorescent-y, green, nasty, still in our like neon spectrum, right? It's stylized, it's not just a white light. And then that wasn't giving us quite enough push from the top to actually key him. So I put a little Aputure MC.
Okay, just like brought it down a little bit.
Brought it down a little bit, wrapped it around, and then pushed that with the same color. And that's gonna just give us that like city street feel inside the booth to kind of tie everything else together.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
So how do you, as a DP, because it's all about control for you, how do you prevent yourself and pull yourself out of being super micro with everything and making sure that you're not finessing over too many little details and at the same time just focusing on the big picture?
Sure. So I walked into this and I tried not to change as much as I could, right? I tried to treat it as a physical location. I think that was a really good way to keep myself from like, oh, I need that building moved. Oh no, now I need it moved back. Oh no, I need a light there. I need more lights. I need to change it, right? So I kind of stepped back from it, let the guys, the techs do their thing. And when I needed a little help, you know, they were there to help me kind of put stuff in its place and where it needed to be.
So that's the whole breakdown of the lighting. This is how it turned out in the final edit.
Okay, so we just wrapped up an entire walkthrough of how to do a virtual production. Everything from the camera work to the actual virtual work to the practical lighting that we have to do inside the scene. So Justin, having now done this and working with Andy for the first time, tell me, how easy would it be for someone, a new filmmaker, to walk off the street and work with a virtual production studio like Cinematographer?
Sure, I mean, Andy and the guys here made it very easy for me. This is my first time, right? I haven't even touched this stuff. I've seen it on The Mandalorian, right? But coming in here, you just really have to wrap your mind around things. And the guys made it really easy. They explained stuff. They told me the program they're working in, Unreal. I did my research, I downloaded it, right? So just like anything else, if you get a new camera, if you get new lights, if you're on set for the first time, wrapping your mind around things so that you can figure out how it works and how to implement it correctly in your project.
I know that on the day of set, I was stressing out about like if this was gonna work and if everything was gonna come together without any technical difficulties, but you made it really easy for me, Andy.
Yeah, preparation is key. Just make sure you talk to us early about what you want so we can have everything ready.
All right, so if people wanna find where you guys are online, where can they go?
Sure, mine on Instagram is @JustinJonesDP.
On Instagram, @Cinepax or @Cinepax.studios.
Sounds good. All right, that's the video. That's a wrap. We will see you guys later.
Woo! Woo!
Let's go.
Yay!
Take